To the Budget Committee again. Today we'll be going through a number of Commissioner presentations, and we have a number of other reports on the agenda. I have one statement to provide to the public, and that's that any member of the public wishing to speak further regarding an issue on the 2016 Budget Committee agenda for today may appear before Council at its meeting on December 14th, 2015 at 7 p.m. when the recommendations from this meeting will go forward for final consideration. If you wish to speak as a delegation, please sign the sheet located at the back of the room or notify the Clerk's Department no later than noon the day of the Council meeting. Any PowerPoint presentations must also be forwarded to the Clerk's Department no later than noon the day of the meeting. I do have regrets from Councillor Elgar, who's representing us at the Niagara Escarpment Commission today, and Mayor Burton, I understand, is on his way. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? I see none. Very good. Welcome to the other members of Council who are here today. We have no consent items or confidential consent items. Our first discussion item is the 2016 Operating Budget Commissioner presentations. The other items on the agenda today relate to the additional information requested by the Budget Committee, a report on video surveillance for the business improvement areas, an update on construction of a community centre at the former hospital site, and the Canada 150 Fund application request, and a confidential discussion item regarding labour relations. I'm going to start us off then.
Yes. All right, thank you, Councillor Adams, and good afternoon. I'm going to be presenting the budget proposals from the CAO office, and that includes the areas of Administrative Executive Management, Service Oakville, and Strategy, Policy, and Communications. Administrative Executive Management includes the Office of the CAO, the Office of the Commissioners, as well as Internal Audit. All of our budgets and the presentations you'll see today were aligned with the key areas of focus that Council establishes through its strategic plan. So there are 5 key areas of focus: good governance, economic growth, environmental leadership, fiscal sustainability, and outstanding service to residents that were identified by Council. But there are also other objectives that are set out in your vision, mission, and values that support the vision to be the most livable town in Canada. And those are also outlined in the departmental business plans. So just looking back at 2015 and some of our accomplishments in the Office of the CAO, certainly we're very strongly aligned with Council in supporting your goal of good governance. At a very high level, we work directly with Council on making sure that the information about Council's decisions gets out to the public. One of the things in 2015, we've just recently launched a new e-newsletter, which allows us to more effectively reach out to the public and share information about your decisions. As well, the town is now recognized as a municipal leader in open data after completing our open data pilot project. It's very early in the process, though, I will say. We released 55 data sets that generated about 3,800 downloads of that information. But we're really just at the very early stages, and that will be something we'll be continuing to work on. In particular, how do we move from open data, which is supporting open government, to really focus on information and telling a story rather than simply releasing the data and giving public access to that information. This will lead to the performance dashboard that we presented to Council in September, so we'll be moving forward with operationalizing the Livable Oakville Performance Dashboard. In terms of internal audit, there were 8 internal audit projects completed in 2015, and an additional 3 are currently in the reporting phase, and Council will be hearing about those in the near future. In terms of outstanding service to our residents, a lot of what we're doing in reaching out to residents and in serving residents from the CAO office perspective is really dealing with expanding the channels of service. So we're really moving into the mobile experience. We launched a new Oakville mobile app this fall, and that will be continued to expand, and we'll add new features in 2016. We also have reviewed our public notice and engagement policies, and that will be coming forward to council in January. And then we'll be doing some more work with the public and expanding our toolkit and looking at some of the online options, again, to reach out and engage the public. We have launched several new online tools, and you'll be hearing about those through the many commission presentations. And we've also, in terms of Service Oakville, we've really expanded now into after-hours call handling so that our residents will get a consistent experience, whether they call during business hours or after hours, and that we're able to handle some of the public safety calls that were coming in through a dispatch service previously. So it's just improving that level of service. And we also provide service through our language line to our diverse community. So we did provide services in multiple languages in 2015. Just want to focus a little bit on our recognition as one of Canada's greenest employers in 2015. This was a significant achievement, and we were very proud of this award that the town received. And it certainly reflects the actions taken by all departments to support and improve environmental sustainability in the community. Our many LEEDs buildings and that approach that we have adopted at the town, as well as initiatives that are underway, partnerships with the community, particularly around planting trees and many other community initiatives. So that really is something that reflects on all of our departments. In terms of Council's goal to provide accessible programs and services, and we certainly know that accessible programs are inclusive and beyond simply the AODA requirements that I really focus on here, but as the CAO office, we do have the accessibility coordinator in our area, and we're really focused on ensuring that the town not only complies with the requirements of the AODA, but really meets the requirements of the public and meets their needs, and really that they feel that they are able to participate actively in our community and in local government. So there are many specific activities underway and a strong partnership with our Accessibility Advisory Committee to reach out to the public. A lot of our focus this year is the new Design of Public Spaces standard that comes into effect on January 1st. As well as additional requirements around accessible documents, particularly on the website. So we're working towards the standards. And we have implemented some processes to make it a lot easier for all departments to access vendors of records for services such as sign language and closed captioning. Okay, I didn't do that. We'll just go back a little bit, but I think we went right to... right into the next commission. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about KPIs. As you know, this is a performance-based, program-based budget. And in addition to highlighting our accomplishments, we also want to focus on how we measure those accomplishments in our KPIs. We do use our citizen survey, which occurs every 2 years, which is why you'll see the gap in reporting out. And as you may recall from many years ago, we've talked about strive to achieve 5. And ideally, you want to be 5 out of 5 in your service satisfaction. But we certainly are in a high, strong 4 out of 5. And these really are outstanding numbers for any government. And we're continuing to try to maintain that level of citizen satisfaction, because that also translates into satisfaction with government. The annual overall tax increase, again, from the CAO's office, that's certainly direction from council that they've tried to maintain. And when you look at our employee voluntary turnover rate, certainly we were below the average, which is around 4% for several years. You're starting to see in 2015 that we're coming up to the average, and this could reflect the higher number of retirements that we're starting to see. Within Service Oakville, we have many metrics that go into every call every day, but we are trying to achieve originally we were at 70% of calls answered with 30 seconds. These numbers reflect that. We're moving to 80% within 2016 because we are achieving that level of service. We also, I mentioned with our online world that plays a greater and greater role in our communications. Certainly our website is our primary tool for residents to get information about the town and its programs. When we look at the number of unique visitors to Oakville.ca, we are continuing to grow that, although now it really is probably at a stable level, and again, these are from unique IP addresses, so it's quite a substantial number of people both within the town and outside the town that come to our website. Social media, we really just launched in 2012 when we relaunched Oakville.ca, and that is one of the fastest growing areas. We do know that about 2/3 of Canadians now use social media, so that will be an area of focus because it allows us to reach out quickly and get information out to the community. See if I can advance this in a different way. Okay, so looking at our actual budget numbers, our overall numbers, you'll see there's a great consistency between our gross and net because we're not an area that has a lot of revenues or recoveries. And it is a very small percentage of the overall town budget. When we look at what drives the costs in our area, certainly personnel. Staff is by far the predominant cost center. And again, when we look at the three areas that I'm speaking about, a fairly even split between the three areas. And in terms of our overall tax levy and where the differences between 2015 and 2016, it is a relatively stable area and in line with Council's direction to keep increases to the rate of inflation. There are some specific cost drivers in our area. And you'll see these across many departments, and really it is contractual and inflationary increases, so both in personnel costs and as well as some of our purchase services. There are some service enhancement in this area. There was funding put in for some additional accessibility support, so that would again be in helping with the accessible documents and accessible document training. We did have a position that is being transferred from parking to Service Oakville because Service Oakville is taking on the frontline role for parking. And we had some additional part-time hours to support our call center service levels. Overall, within the town, when we're looking at challenges moving forward, the town is trying to maintain stable operating costs, and that's a very important goal. And while we're doing this, we're also trying to maintain service standards and meet citizen changing expectations. So this is a challenge, and certainly it's something that we've been able to achieve over the past, but it is becoming more and more challenging as we're having to expand service lines, when we're looking at new facilities and new programs from capital. When we look at the impacts of growth on our operating budget, it is a challenge. We are very committed, and as Nancy spoke to yesterday, we have our asset management and looking at our infrastructure renewal is very important to the town. And one area I just wanted to touch upon as we move forward around talent management, we certainly know from a demographic point of view, we are looking at a baby boomer generation that is nearing retirement, so that will be another challenge that we'll throw into the hopper for departments in managing their program areas. We're also looking at new skills that we're recruiting into the municipal sector as we go more and more digital, as more and more services are online, and as we become a data-driven organization. This is calling for new skills as well. So how will this impact the CAO's office looking to 2016? The Administrative Executive Management Team takes a lead role on the many complex challenges that face the town. So we do know of several that have already been identified for 2016. We're moving forward with a project around the former hospital lands. We have the former Public Works site. We have Glen Abbey, Merton, Midtown, Downtown Cultural Hub. So those are all significant projects that the commissioners and CAO will be involved in. And we expect there will be other issues that will emerge throughout the year. The CAO's office has also been very committed to supporting emergency preparedness in the town and community resilience. So as we know, with climate change on the horizon, certainly making sure that the town is ready, both the town as an administration as well as the community is something that the town is focused on. And as I mentioned, we are moving more and more into being a knowledge-driven organization to really maximize our effective and efficient operations. The administrative executive management team will be providing leadership on this and our other digital initiatives. When we look at Service Oakville, we're continuing to implement service improvements to achieve our one town, one window, and one customer service delivery. We've really added the one customer because just to remind staff that the customer, it is one customer and they like to have just one window into the town as opposed to having to deal with multiple departments. Our focus looking at 2016 is continuing to enhance after-hours call handling services, particularly related to parking. And we're also looking at the type of calls that go on across the organization to see if we can reduce the use of voicemail in the high volume areas and give the customer the live answer that they, I would say, want and expect. Because it does make business go a little bit faster if we can have one call and get it done instead of having to get into that back and forth. So that will be a key area of focus for 2016 and moving forward. We're also looking at implementing a new customer relationship management tool and a new knowledge-based solution that will have enhanced online service options. So we have a report a problem on our website and through our mobile app, but it's a very limited tool. So we're looking, and again, that's just the change that's happened in the last 5 years. So there are better tools out there, so we're looking to improve that. And you'll see that in many communities that have sort of the newer tools, the ability to take the picture, send it in, get immediate action really helps town staff because you have a whole community that's helping you identify problems. And in the strategy, policy, and communications areas, again, we're looking at our online world to really drive the changes that we're doing. It is the primary way that we reach out to residents. So we're designing the tools that meet the service channel they want. So a long time ago, in a galaxy far away, we just had print, and that's all we had to create. And you'd print, you'd put something in the newspaper, and that was it. Those days are long gone, and there are probably channels out there that we don't even know about that we'll be doing by the end of next year. So the mobile world is very important, making things really simple, easy to use on a smartphone. It continues to grow. It's about 1/3 of Canadians now access most of their information through a smartphone or a tablet. We're also looking at, again, supporting the open data and launching the dashboard. We do want to look and reach out to the public to update our public engagement toolkit. That looks at all the ways we engage the public and see if there's opportunities for improvement, and certainly try to tailor it again as much as we can to the public's needs. And just one thing for council, because I know it's been a request for quite a while around Town TV and making it mobile friendly. The work is underway right now. The team has started to look at it and look at the issues, including how do we make sure we get our closed captioning on it and some of the other necessities to make it accessible, not only mobile friendly, but for all of our residents. And we do hope to launch a new live streaming feature through YouTube early in the new year. That's the solution that they're looking at right now, but it doesn't work yet, but hopefully it will by early in 2016. So that is just a quick overview of sort of where we've come and what we're looking at for the next year. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. I have one comment for you, and that is in your KPIs, I wonder if you could double check your annual overall tax increases. I think you may have accidentally picked up some unadjusted figures in that list. So if staff wouldn't mind double checking that and correcting the figures for our booklets as well as for the public documentation that's being put online and elsewhere, we want to make sure that we're getting the right information. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, and thank you for the information on Town TV. YouTube's an awesome resource to broadcast our Town TV. The citizen satisfaction survey, I saw the number was declining from 2011 to date, but I just was curious, what's the margin of error on that particular
It
survey?
is plus or minus
Okay.
3%.
That'd be a
so-
good footnote, just so people don't think
Yeah.
we're slipping, because we're definitely, I think, staying in that ballpark.
Yeah.
311, how is that, what are the numbers like on 311 in terms of interfacing with Service Oakville at this time?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll have to get back to you on what the numbers are. We do have an agreement, with direct transfer, but I don't have that number handy and how many come through to us.
Okay, thank you, I would appreciate that.
Any others? Great, thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation, and I think Commissioner Lalonde, I think you're up next.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to present the Corporate Services Commission highlights of the budget to you this afternoon. I have a list here in this slide outlining which tabs you can find our material at in the book. So I will refer to them from time to time through the presentation. And I'm going to present a number of slides that outline our achievements over the last year, and I would list from the Council Strategic Plan that I think the priorities that we have addressed are good governance, environmental leadership, fiscal sustainability, and outstanding service to residents. And many of our achievements cross those goals, so it will just link up into this sort of general list for you. Under accomplishments, we did have a by-election that we completed this year. We've had many incremental improvements in online hiring and the recruitment process. That is gradually becoming more and more automated and is saving tremendous amounts of time, particularly around arrangements of face-to-face contact, such as interviews and so on. We did receive our fund for the ice storm, and while the reception of a check is maybe an easy thing to do, the work that built up to us receiving that was extensive and required a great deal of commitment and time. We did complete an HST audit and have spoken with all of the parties that are affected by the HST audit. Once again, this is sort of a strange accomplishment, but the HST audit was a very onerous and time-consuming task for our finance department to work through. This is essentially the third budget that we have presented this year. We did a budget in the spring, and then we've done the capital budget, and we've done the operating budget. And I'm hoping that we have a little bit of respite before we start on the next budget for the next year. It sort of feels like it's just a continuous process. One event that will be taking place next year, we've been working through it behind the scenes, but when we make corrections to the budget book, it's a very elastic process as we go through it behind the scenes. It requires a great deal of attention to all of the various pages that are updated. You make one change here and it cascades through 150 pages, and we're in the process of automating that, so we are hoping next year our budget book production will be much streamlined. We have completely revised the licensing bylaw. That went to council, I think, last Monday, and I believe it's been 5 years since the last revision. It was a very large task, and I mean, you will notice as we talk through our various presentations that many of our accomplishments are teamwork. There's very few that stand on their own, and the licensing bylaw was quite a widespread effort that involved people from bylaw, it involved people from each of the user departments. It had a heavy reliance on legal to get that process completed. We are in the process, I wondered about this one, but we have a new bylaw services strategy. We had been asked by council earlier in this year to review our service of bylaw provisions during the evenings, overnight, and so on. That work is mainly done. It has not yet been presented to council. We will be bringing it in shortly, but that was an extensive process that we have concluded. The hospital $130 million gift had extensive legal and financial work going on behind it. There was extensive auditing of the financial statements of the hospital, and I believe there are 5 legal agreements that we put together before we recommended that gift be given to the hospital, and so I have listed that. The intelligent transportation system, that is taking place on a gradual implementation in the transit facility. Once again, it's a very large leap forward for the transit folks, but it also is a computerized system that has taken a great deal of resources from the Information Systems Department. And I did want to note that we have deployed our system based on radio technology as opposed to cellular technology. This has been an enormous cost-cutting achievement for us, and it was groundbreaking, and now we see Metrolinx is starting to look at using radio-based communications for their system as well. The cost justification, or the cost justification is very, very significant over the cellular service, and we are very pleased with that, and pleased to have established it so seamlessly. The integrated library system is something that we have accomplished. When we talk about the integrated library system, we're talking really about the book tracking and patron tracking system, and you'll see next year we're hoping to have some developments on that system that I'll mention a little bit later on, but the base system is in place. And the parking system that has just gone in is a major rework for our parking department, parking administration, but also there's a great number of contributors to that from information systems, from bylaw and bylaw enforcement, and legal, as it turns out. We've also done a great deal of preparation for the development of the new Oakville Arena, or the Oakville Arena refurbishment. It's a very, very extensive process, and we have brought reports to council on this before. We're also launching a new system for establishing the Oakville Arena rebuild. It's a very complex overhaul, and we're using a new system called IPD, which has great promise. It's used in many other government initiatives across government and private sector banking initiatives across North America, and we're embracing that for the first time. So there's not only been a lot of work going into the actual practicalities of the new facility, there's also been a great deal of work in working through how we do this and how it challenges some of our structures. We will be bringing another report on that to council sometime early in the new year, so I can see you're looking curiously at me, and we'll be happy to answer those questions for you. And preparation for the hospital demolition. I'll say a little bit more about that because I'll be talking about the timeline for the new community center is really, we have to clear away a lot of work from my commission first, so I will be dealing with that in a few minutes. Whoops. Okay, I'm going to go through several key outcomes and KPIs now, and my presentation is focusing on this graph that you see there. What that graph does is the blue line maps the departmental budget as a percentage of the overall corporate budget. So being in the back office, one of the things that you don't want to do is you don't want to let your costs of back office get away from you. So we measure those, as you will see there. The red line indicates our FTE count. So how is our full-time equivalency growing compared to the organization's overall growth? You would anticipate that it should be stable. If you're gaining efficiencies, you would anticipate that it might be in decline. And if it's increasing, there needs to be an explanation. So I'd like to take you through those. And then I've picked one outcome, or maybe two for each of the departments. So under political governance, which is essentially the clerk's office, 95% of the meetings were held in public. which is very good, and I think our reporting on that is considered a best practice across the various municipalities. And you can see a little bump there under gross operating budget, and that is the election. So when we have an election, we hire about 400, I think, maybe it's 500. We hire a lot of people to conduct the election. So you get that bump, and you'll see another reference to the election in a little while. But that's political governance. Under human resources, you can see that our numbers are quite stable. We are just a little under 1.5% of the gross operating budget, and it's slightly in decline, and percentage full-time is declining slowly compared to the rest of the organization. 97% of the staff who took the LEADS training program reported an increase in learning. Our LEADS training program is a very, very active program that provides training to our organization, and is gradually being copied by many organizations across the province. And this number is a new one to pop up, and it is 2.1% of staff. This is not days lost or hours lost, but if you take our staff, 2.1% of our staff would experience a lost time due to an incident. So we will be tracking that longitudinally over the next several years so that we can see how our health and safety and labor activities are going. Financial services, once again, it's a very stable line there. You can see that it has declined slightly compared to the rest of the organization on gross operating budget and percentage FTEs. This will become a theme in my presentation, where a lot of the expenses that happen to gain efficiencies in the organization are carried in the corporate services sector, and the efficiencies are better customer service out in the operating departments. While financial services is large enough that it doesn't appear as a blip on this graph, I would call your attention to the fact that we did transfer 3 FTE positions into financial services to help us to deal with taking over the finances of the library. So you see that sort of trend of back office stuff moving into corporate services, which is making some of our other departments, able to spend their resources on what is really most important to their operations. Regulatory services. Once again, stable, marching sort of towards a more efficient framework. We will be bringing a report back on after-hour service. So this may change as we go into next year, but my view is that KPIs are all about telling the story and explaining the trends. So I would like to note that the average resolution for an investigation this year moved from 73 days down to 36 days. You may ask yourself, how on earth could you accomplish that? It's really, we are watching our record keeping much, much more closely. We're trying to track our calls much more effectively. And at the end of the day, that will translate into better customer service, because when people have a complaint, they will say, how long will this take to resolve? And we'll be able to say, this is what you can expect. So that is regulatory services. Legal. Once again, stable line in decline or moving towards more efficiency. We have had 91% of our prosecutions are successful, so these are our times that we spend in court. 91% of the time we are successful, and I put in this number, the 10.5 million in parkland entitlement calculations. That's not what we get in parkland entitlement calculations, but it is the number of calculations we do, so it gives you a sense of how active the Realty Services Department is in trying to calculate out these kinds of costs. Information systems. You can see information systems is on the increase, and this is in keeping with all of the discussion, you've already heard from Jane about the digitization of our customer service stuff. All of that stuff is relying on computer services. So the computer services are moving up in terms of the amount of money that they manage and in the number of people that we need to look after things, albeit slowly. Similarly to the financial services element that I described in an earlier slide, information systems and solutions attracted 3 positions from the library in 2014, which contributed to this line going up as we took over complete support for their information services. So that moved into IS&S a year ago, and as I said, it allows the library to focus on library activity and not have to worry about network issues and so on. And also this year, as in 2015, I had mentioned the radio communications. A radio analyst came from another department and found its way into IS&S as an outcome from our AVL and our intelligent transportation system. So that skill was required. It was deployed somewhere else, and it's moved into IS&S. Facilities and construction management is kind of interesting. The gross operating budget is increasing, and that's mainly because we've made a correction. We used to charge some of the facilities and construction management cost of capital, and we undertook an extensive audit this year and mapped out how much time is each person who's working there actually working on capital projects and what should be charged to a capital account, and how much are they working on operating activities. It turns out that we were overcharging our capital a little bit and undercharging our operating. So when I present the operating budget to you, you can see the operating costs are going up a little bit. This means that a greater share of our capital budgets are going to actually the capital piece and not so much to project management and so on. And the percentage FTEs has taken a bit of an increase. That's because of 2 activities. One was we had a person assigned to a temporary contract in 2014, and we made that into a full-time contract. The person had been here for some time, and we corrected that and made that a full-time position, so the count went up. And then this year, we replaced a contracted out service for a building maintenance and control with 2 part-time people, which translates into a full-time equivalency bump. But it was financially way, way, way more effective for us to do this internally than it was for us to continue to outsource it. And here you see our gross operating budget as a percentage of the town's activity. So I gave you a bunch of detail on that just a few minutes ago. You can see that corporate services is spending about 10.4% of the entire organization. If you are sort of an analytical type and you look back to the slides that Nancy presented yesterday, you'll see that corporate support shows at 8.3%. That's because in the corporate slides, 8.3% was assigned to corporate support. Corporate services also has some public-facing activities such as regulatory. We've taken bylaw enforcement and put them in there, and that's bumped up the percentage that we are occupying of the pie a little bit. So if you want to know what back office costs, it's about 8%, and if you want to know what back office plus those public-facing activities, it's about 10.4%. These are the way that our expenses break down in terms of corporate services, and as you would expect, we're higher than the average department in terms of staff because we do a lot of day-to-day operational activity. Our work is very, very operational with some help from purchase services. In terms of the gross operating budget, you can see there how the departments break down. IS&S is the largest budget in the commission, followed by financial services, and followed by FCM. Here is the way the expenses break down year over year. I've given you explanation on how we compare to the corporation. You can see there that there are only really marginal changes in everything except IS&S, and I have focused on that already about the impending digitization of the organization and the need to track all of those expenses. I might comment briefly on this and point out that in many organizations, they will spread out information systems costs across the organization so that each department is paying for a piece of them. I'm very pleased that we are using this technique of focusing all of the costs of the organization for information systems and solutions in one department. So while it makes it a little funny because you see a sliver of efficiency here and the costs over here, it really allows us to manage and control what it is we're actually spending on this kind of activity. Program cost drivers, of course, personnel costs. You saw what a share we have of our own is involved in our staff costs. And cost driver is software maintenance. Software maintenance, if you go back in time, software maintenance as a typical rule is about 18% of the cost of a purchase of a product, and you do that on an annual basis. It's been a general evolution towards about 30%. So these software maintenance costs are really outside of our control. If you want to continue to use the product, you have to pay for the licensing fees, and it's expensive, and it escalates according to its own formulas. There is, under the capital projects piece, we tend to, in most areas, kind of follow this stepwise pattern. So as more and more capital projects come in, each person does a little bit more, and eventually you bump into a place where you have to add a person. But there is a direct relationship between the capital projects and facilities. You have more buildings under management, then you need, you inherit more costs because of that. And under IS&S, of course, every time you put in a new system or new software, there's costs associated with that. And under service adjustments, many of those track back into information systems as well. Major challenge, I think in the coming year, you have heard that we will be putting in a new customer service system, and our class system is at the end of life. These are hazards that go along with being heavily reliant on information systems. And we have two major ones that we are going to have to work our way through in the coming couple of years. This is good news and bad news. It's good news because when you get a new system, you get more functionality. It's slicker, it works better, it does all kinds of new things that you can't do. But even in old systems, there's always a great deal of corporate value. And it costs money to replace the system, but it also costs money to train the people who are going to use the new system. There's always the issue of historical information. Sometimes there's more work that goes into preserving the historical information so that it will be there if you need it. A financial system, you have to keep the records around for 7 years, then actually goes into the launch of the new system. So, I just wanted to outline to you that it's kind of sweet and it's kind of bitter at the same time. Looking to the future, which is really looking to 2016, we will be having another by-election. I think our clerk's office is going to be really, really good at by-elections. We have a search underway right now for a new director of human resources. We are hoping to launch a new learning management system. I had mentioned the LEADS program, which offers great education, but we want to be able to track that back into employee files. We are in the process of negotiating 3 contracts right now. The OPFFA are in negotiation. QP 136 and QP 1329 are meeting for labor negotiations as we speak. Big effort this year in asset management master planning. I think you've already seen a little bit of attention given to the asset management. This program has been very, very helpful to us as we've done things like our DC studies and background studies to be able to actually go to a system and find all of our materials logged as opposed to having to go out and take a manual inventory of them. So we're going to be moving that onto the next level through a master planning study, which will be coming back to council at some point in 2016. The budget book I already mentioned. We'll actually be using it next year. Next year, we hope to have a new service level model in place or an endorsed old model. We will bring it in, and we'll see where that goes. The alternate dispute resolution that I've listed under legal is kind of interesting. What is happening there is the courts, as everybody knows, are getting clogged up with various types of cases. And one type of case that the courts would rather not spend their time on are parking infractions. So with the new system, we've also put in this alternate dispute resolution system where we will have a screening officer, which we have now, and you will come and see the screening officer if you have a dispute about a parking ticket. But if you object, in most circumstances, there's some exceptions, and you want to object to what the screening officer has said, you will go to a hearings officer. A hearings officer is a quasi-judicial position that will hear your case and decide on how to end it or how to bring it to closure, and it will not go to the court. So that means our court time will be able to be used for more acute issues, and I think both the courts and the legal department will be happier with that. Oh, sorry. Somehow I lost my questions slide. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them before I go on to the special reports that I would like to touch on.
Other questions at this time? Councillor Knoll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Commissioner, I have a couple of questions. The first one is investigations. You talked about investigations and the incredible reduction in time it takes to investigate. But there still obviously is a cost related to investigations. And it dawned on me recently, I've got a particular developer in my ward, and I won't name names, but they're repeat visitors, frequent flyers to investigative services. Mr. Barry knows probably the one I'm referring to. So obviously that's amassing quite a bit of cost in terms of constantly responding to issues that they are creating or their subtrades are creating. Do we have any options to recover any of those costs, whether it's through an SPPA and a prosecution or whatever the case is? Is there any way to actually get some of that money back?
I think I'm going to probably call on the assistance of Mr. Barry, but just briefly, if people sort of are repeat offenders, then gradually what happens is the fines that we impose on them escalate. And the more you repeat, the more they escalate. And that revenue does flow back to the town. So while we've gone to great lengths to map out, cost of issuing a license and make it cost recovery and not impose on the tax roll, when you get into that repeat offenders or those extensive and difficult investigations, it really becomes a tax burden with some recompense by the escalating fines that come at the end of it. And do you want to add anything to that?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. The only great explanation. The only thing I would add is that we do and will continue to look for ways of administratively charging back some costs. We do, I think in March of this year, we passed an administrative fee that's associated with our property standards bylaw. So if officers go there more than an X amount of times, no matter what, there's an administrative cost applied to the property owner. And those are the types of things that we'll look at in the future. But as far as court costs, whenever we have to go to court, we can probably assume that it's going to be a money-losing venture unless we are talking somebody that's committed a situation after situation.
In the case that I'm referring to, I mean, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of hours probably over the course of years been spent on this particular development or building site. Thinking about that one in particular, is there any hope on the horizon for being able to recover some of those costs? Because you're talking about property standards. I'm not sure if that's necessarily what the bylaw is that we're talking about here. Is there hope that we could recover some of those? Because it's getting to the point of being ridiculous now, and it's not fair that taxpayers have to pick up the tab, not to mention endure the inconvenience caused by the particular developer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in those cases, and we're particularly talking about noise in this case, and there are very limited opportunities to recover costs except through courts. As we look to review the noise bylaw and bring something forward, hopefully in the next year or two, we will look to other administrative penalty type options that we can incorporate.
Thank you very much. Next question, a simple one. What does IPE stand for?
Integrated Project delivery.
Oh, it's
And
IPD.
IPD, yeah.
Oh, I thought you said IPE, okay.
IPD.
Integrated Program Delivery. Next one, are we getting, with all these new public-facing IT programs, like our app, our complaints form, all these things that we're making available, which are wonderful, are we seeing an increase in calls for tech support by the public, whereas that would probably not have been the case in the past? Are our staff having to administer basically help desk services for the general public?
Not to the best of my knowledge. Our help desk is an internal service and take calls only for internal uses. What we would get is where technology is deployed in the recreation centers and the libraries and so on, often the managers of those are asking us to make sure that our systems are working properly in those areas. But we haven't, to the best of my knowledge, experienced people calling in from outside with complaints about that.
Well, that probably means that they're very well planned and very well administered then. You talked about all the IT costs being in the IT basket. Would you say it's 100% of IT costs, or would there be some percentage that's still stranded in the individual department budgets?
No, this is a policy decision, and there are exceptions to it across the organization. So there are elements stranded in departments across the organization, but we have aggregated all of the major expenses into IT. So, you know, if pushed, it's probably somewhere over 90% of the costs are in IT. And as a policy, we try to put them there so that we can track them. If we find them stranded, then we make an effort to move them in.
But we can count on 90% of that reflecting the actual IT expenditures on the part of the town?
I would say yes.
Okay. In terms of end-of-life computer gear, do we recover any revenue for that? I know in the old days we used, and probably maybe we still do, we used to donate it. Are we, I know there's a lot of businesses out there selling off-lease equipment now. Are we participating in any of those revenue streams?
We have gradually extended the life of most of our equipment to the point where when we take it out of service, it's essentially valueless.
Okay.
And we have a service that comes in and takes it away, and we pay a fee to have it taken away. We have followed that model that you've just described, where we've given it to organizations to redistribute, but that's fallen into, we don't do that anymore. It's prohibitive by the amount of work that's involved in it.
So in a sense, we're wringing every last bit of life out of this equipment before we...
Pretty,
okay, that's
pretty
good.
well. A person with an old computer is usually glad to see it get replaced.
I can imagine. And last question I had for you now is, you talked about the fact that we're now searching for an HR director.
I'm sorry, I just didn't hear you.
You had said that we're now, the search for the new HR director
Yes.
is underway. Why would that have not occurred previously? We knew the retirement was coming up. Why wouldn't we have been involved in succession planning so that we would have had like an immediate cutover?
Well, there was the fact that it was fairly short notice. She I think gave us about 6 weeks of notice. It was a planned notification.
I take it all back.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Councillor Duddeck.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. One comment I have, and the other is a question. The other evening, we were at the opening for the new hospital, which was a very, very upbeat occasion, shall we say. And unfortunately, I don't think we took the opportunity to thank our staff for all their hard work. I know I gestured to you in the underground parking there, but thank you to all the staff that were involved. That was a lot of work and a lot of meetings taking place, so thank you. The other is in regards to the average resolution of an investigation going from 73 to 36 days. Is that also attributed as a result of Service Oakville? Like, I know now things are being tracked through that in terms of the department and then what transpires. Is that part of the bonus?
Not yet, but it will be. So as the Service Oakville initiative, excuse me, the bylaw enforcement is scheduled to transition to Service Oakville. I'm not sure what the order is at this point, but it is coming up, and we would expect that we would see some benefit from that. This is mainly an internal focus on documentation and service that has been undertaken in that department.
Okay, others on the committee? Councillor Lishchyna.
Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Lalonde. Just looking at this last slide with respect to the information systems, you indicated that that's obviously a very major expenditure, and the new programs, new software comes about. So I'm just curious, every municipality has different programs, software programs for what they're tracking? Or do some municipalities use economy of scale and say, you know what, let's get together and buy this next latest program and get a better price? Is any of that happening?
There are several best of breeds. There are probably 5 or 6 major systems that many municipalities use. One of the, excuse me, I'm sure I'm coughing into the microphone. One of the difficulties in trying to find a system and launch it across 2 municipalities is there's generally fairly significant business differences in the way one municipality operates to another municipality. So makes implementation very difficult. There are some examples that you can find, but finding ones that work really well are fairly limited. For example, we use a shared dispatch system for fire between Burlington and Oakville. So we have explored that. What seems to be more effective is to go out as joint purchasers. So if we're looking for a recreation system and Brampton's looking for a recreation system and Peel's looking for a recreation system, if we go out on a single or shared RFP, those economies of scale can save us money and get us better bargains. Also, there are a series of contracts that have been negotiated by the province that the municipality is allowed to ride on the coattails of the province, and some of those are astonishingly good value, and we take every opportunity to make use of those.
Any others? Just have one question for you regarding the hospital demolition. Obviously, in the last news cycle, there's been discussion about using old hospitals for Syrian refugee settlement. Is there any information that you can share on that? I understand there are some technical issues with our hospital that might be shared. Mayor Burton, do you have some information?
It's not really a budget item. When I used the word technical in my advice to you, it was late at night and I was searching for the right word. Logistical might have been the better word, and that's fully explained in the statement I issued to the media today and have circulated to all the members of council. Basically, it means it isn't decommissioned yet, and they're looking for decommissioned buildings, and our hospital will be decommissioned, won't be decommissioned until April, or if you prefer, March 31st. And at that time, we get vacant possession. And we'll have to wait and see whether it's, what the best use of it will be at that time. And if, as I suspect, because of the contact I've had with the federal government, that the temporary housing need has been dealt with by then, we will, in all likelihood, proceed with our established plan to demolish. And well, there's 3 or 4 steps listed in my statement. There's tests to do and demolition and so on. So anyway, I would refer anyone who's concerned about that to the very good roundup today on the Oakville Beavers website.
Mr. Chair, I have 3 more slides to go because I'm addressing some of the reports. The hospital is one of them. So in keeping with the mayor, I'll be telling you about some of the logistical issues that we have to get through in the next little while. So if I can.
Great, I think that's very helpful. I know that there's been a certain degree of interest in this particular question, and hence my question. And while I recognize that it's only an aside as a budget issue, because of the discussion on this report regarding the demolition, I thought it was important to put that out in the public. Okay? Commissioner, you've got a couple more slides that you want to go through dealing with specific reports that you provided to us.
Yes.
So I'll let you go forward.
Yes, in your package there is an appendix to a report produced by Nancy Sully regarding the OMB costs, and I can report to you that from January to December the estimated costs of OMB litigation will be $1.2 million. Litigation budget in legal is $500,000. We set that several years ago at $500,000 based on a normal year. And then we set up a litigation reserve in preparation for years when you have more litigation. So the litigation reserve right now is sitting at about $2.5 million. And we will be using that to make up for the variance in the costs between the $500,000 and the $1.2 million I've just reported to you. Shall I just carry on, or? There is a report on video surveillance that is in the package, and to give it some context, the town has about 499 video cameras in its fleet. They are watching doors, they are watching rooms, they're watching parking lots, and we have found them very, very effective in terms of safety issues and to some extent security issues. We costed out the BIA, and when we costed the BIA, it was based on a model that would give complete coverage to the 3 areas. So 176 cameras in downtown, 176 cameras in Brawny, and 148 cameras on Kerr Street, for a total of about 500 cameras for the BIAs. When we costed those out, the total aggregated cost of the BIA system would have been about $4 million. There are significant economies of scale in putting in 500 cameras because you might put 3 cameras on a pole and run power to it once. So the cost for a per camera cost, if council should choose to say, let's put in cameras in the most suitable or the most needed areas, we're estimating about $6,000 a camera. That is a high-end estimate because we were thinking we picked a pole that wouldn't have power and so that we would be safe. So that's a $6,000 cost. All the cameras are in keeping with MFIPA. Files are deleted after 2 weeks and completely compliant with that legislation. So if there are no questions, I'll... Okay.
Mayor Bird?
Commissioner, just because some of our municipal jargon isn't easily deciphered by the public, could you just maybe enlarge a little bit about what MFIPA is referring to?
Oh, that's the Municipal Privacy Act that governs what you can take and store records for. And basically, if we take a record of, and it's about a particular person or a particular entity, that person or entity has ownership over it. So they can see it by making appeal to the municipality to see the records concerning them. And there are very strict rules about how long you can keep those records. So first of all, you can only take records for a legitimate purpose. So you can't take them just because you're interested in knowing stuff. It has to be to meet a legitimate need. And then you must destroy them according to a set of guidelines. Some things, like financial records, I think you store those for 7 years. Video records have a life expectancy of 2 weeks.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I know that, I think that's a very helpful addition to public understanding.
Thank you. Regarding the former hospital site, there is a report in there that is from the 3 commissioners. This is another one of these shared projects where we all are playing a rather large role in a very large project. And because the next year or so involves work from Corporate Services Commission, I am reporting to you that phase 1 of the environmental assessment is complete. So we did do a phase 1 assessment much earlier on. We know that there are 6 areas of concern in the site, and we have done borehole testing of the subject lands. We did talk to the hospital about perhaps doing some destructive testing while they were still in there, but it would have destroyed their equipment. MRIs are particularly sensitive to vibration. So the phase 2 assessment is pending vacant possession. We are working with the hospital to see if we can carry out the destructive testing in the floor of the building before March 31st, but it's all dependent on their schedule. They have contractors coming in on December 14th to start removing equipment, and it's a very, very busy schedule. So that's a little bit up in the air, but we are planning a phase 2 assessment to assess what is going on in these 6 areas of concern, and I cannot predict what it will show. We will then move on to a demolition plan, and we can't do a demolition plan until we know the level of contamination in the hospital. The hospital was built in 1950, and it's reasonable to expect there will be contaminated materials. Hospitals are also notorious for having dirty buildings when they are vacated. So the demolition plans will be determined by the issues of contamination. We are hoping that demolition will start late in 2016. If you map it out, you do your assessment in sort of spring, early summer, find out what are the contamination issues, do the plan and the design for a few months, and then you start into demolition. Demolition scheduled to start, as I said, in late 2016. That will, we think, be least disruptive to the community if we can do it in the winter. And then the next phase will begin, and it all depends on the contamination. I mean, the location of a facility may even depend on that. And and there was a question on licensing fees. If there are no questions on the hospital, I'll move.
Councillor Noe, you have a question on the hospital?
I have one question on the hospital. So based on the 6 areas of concern, I don't want to get into technical details, just to ask this question. Based on that phase 1 assessment, do you have any budgetary concerns with respect to the remediation of those 6 concerns?
I'm optimistic, but I can't predict. You know, the phase 1 assessment says you must look more deeply into these 6 areas.
Right.
That's what it tells you. So we will be looking more deeply into those 6 areas, and I can't give you an indication of what I think will happen.
Were there any head-smacking surprises as a result?
No.
Were there any? No? Okay, thank you.
Mayor Burton?
Commissioner, could you just clarify, these are 6 areas that, because of the nature of hospitals, you know you have to look at carefully, and that makes them a concern? Or you've looked through the hospital and you've found 6 areas that have issues that cause you a concern?
We have conducted an ESA Level 1 study. What they do is they look at all of the documents related to that building, and they say, here are the areas that you should probe more deeply. And so, for example, the hospital had oil tanks for its heating plant. Oil tanks always attract more attention. You know, they get old and you have to look at them. We know that there is a single heating facility, and there's a pipeline that runs from the major hospital over the Lawson building, and they've said you need to look at that pipe. So these are not surprises, but they are indicated areas to look further into.
So thank you for clarifying. These are areas that we are concerned to be sure we know about,
That's right.
rather than we have identified problems yet.
Correct.
Thank you.
Continue.
Okay, this is my last slide, I hope. I did find my question slide on the way. It's at the end of the entire package. So there were questions on licensing fees, and I think if I can put it in a nutshell, why did some go up and some go down? In the past, we took great care to audit our licensing fees to make sure that as an aggregate of all of those licensing fees, we were not charging taxpayers to support licensing. Earlier this year, we undertook a detailed study. This kind of goes back to my attention to detail on the closing of cases. And we basically did a zero-based budgeting system where we looked at every activity. We did a time study on how long does it take to conclude this. We evaluated our record keeping, our material costs, the plates, and so on. And at the end of the day, some of the costs went up and some of the costs went down. The aggregate remained essentially the same because we were paying close attention to that, but we did our internal rebalancing. There was a particular question on the fire inspections or the inspections for boarding for bed and breakfast. Thank you. There is a fee for a fire inspection, but there is no bed and breakfast licensing requirement to launch that. And on further questioning, We think that the only way that that inspection would be triggered is if somebody's setting up a bed and breakfast and want to have a fire inspection, or if there's a complaint from a guest who wants to have a fire inspection. So we've calculated what the costs are. They're in there, but it will gradually, well, it will become less and less used except for those special circumstances.
Mayor Burton, you had a question?
Thank you, Commissioner, for that explanation. With regard to the most detailed audit undertaken to date of the fee schedule, if there are individuals who'd like to check your work, is that audit available for them to pour through and double check?
I think that the town manager promised that we would be bringing a report forward on sort of the policy and so on, and we will review how we can enhance that to include that information in it.
Thank you.
Oh, did I not answer your question? I'm sorry.
I believe, Mayor Burton, you're actually asking the audit work that was done in the balancing, would that information be available? I'm not sure on that, but I will undertake to determine what form it would be in and how we could make sure it could be viewed by those who might want to see it.
Sorry, I apologize for that.
This is an effort by ISNS to get additional funding for equipment in the council.
So let me,
I think we've dealt with all the questions. Members, Councilor O'Meara, that last question sort of originated from you. Are you satisfied?
Sorry, I'm going to, I guess. Yeah, the only, so it's not just for people with bed and breakfast who might want to request that service. It could be for, say, somebody who's setting up a basement rental apartment, or would that be a similar inspection cost for?
fire chief is here somewhere. Is that a yes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, any basement apartment or?
It would be best if you came down to a mic so that those who might be watching online could get an answer to. If the mic is working.
If an individual was to, for instance, want to set up a basement apartment, there are requirements under the building code to allow that to happen. The proper process would be to take out a building permit, and the building permit fees would encompass an inspection by both fire and the building department, and you would, at the end of the day, meet the requirements and have your building permit signed off, and you would be legal, provided the zoning is correct, to have a second occupancy in your home. That's a separate issue from the licensing bylaw fees.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was just getting at. If this bed and breakfast inspection charge is only for bed and breakfast, then even though we don't license that anymore, we have now an unlicensed charge on the books, which people, so I was just wondering if there's any other reason why anyone would need to use this fee, and maybe we would change the name of the fee in our schedule. If not, if that's the only one, then I'm fine with that. I just wasn't aware if that might be ever used for anything else in the town.
I believe the reason that fee was originally put in that bylaw was for that specific and exact purpose, because all of our other inspections that we do through the fire code and speaking for the building code branch as well are covered individually without being involved in that bylaw.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we've exhausted questions for you.
Thank you.
And I believe we're on to Jane Closey as our next commissioner presentation. Welcome.
Budget Chair and members of the Budget Committee, I was going to present to you the Community Development Commission program areas. I have with me today the directors from the various program areas who can speak to any detailed questions you may have at the end of the presentation. There are 8 program areas within the Community Development Commission, and they're listed here on this slide with the respective tabs within the budget books. In terms of the areas that this commission deals with in terms of council's strategic plan, you have 5 areas of focus within your strategic plan. Predominantly, we as a group deal with 3 of them: environmental leadership, economic growth, and outstanding service to our residents. And I have noted 2 other strategic goals which may not be your areas of focus for this particular term, but are ones that we deal with on an ongoing basis, and that's the cultural environment as well as continuous improvement in terms of our overall programs. So I highlight those because when you look at the accomplishments that we have for 2015, many of them involve 1 or 2 of those strategic goals within the program areas. So I've highlighted several on the screen. I won't deal with each one of them, but I would note that the initiation of the 5-year review with its public meeting in the early spring is a major initiative that was started in this year. It will be a multi-year program, so you'll see it over 2016 and likely into 2017. We've done a fair amount of work on our cultural heritage areas with the change in the heritage legislation quite a number of years ago, actually. We've gone through a process of updating bylaws, and now we're into updating the districts. We had established the commercial district in 2014 in the downtown area, and you'll see a report on the 1st and 2nd Heritage Conservation District coming forward to your Planning and Development meeting on November the 30th. We also initiated the Cultural Heritage Landscape study. Council had endorsed a strategy in 2014, and this year we started the implementation of that strategy and looking at all of the areas that we had identified in the strategy to see what steps we need to take for them on the cultural heritage landscape. The other ones I'd note is the Downtown Transportation Streetscape study that was approved in the spring. That was a multi-year program that looked at how we can renew and refresh our streetscape in the downtown area. In terms of service innovation, these are items that you may not see as actually projects, but certainly from a customer service perspective, you begin to see them appear. I would note the expanded use of interactive mapping that we now have on the website. We're in the process of building permits, for example, are up on the website. You can search and find those. Within the last week or 2, we moved Committee of Adjustment applications up there. And we're in the process of updating our development application, as that's now a little dated when we see the new ways in which we can map those programs. We have, over the last 2 years, updated our rates and fees, and I'll speak to that in more detail later. We also have, in the process of consolidating our permit activities, you had seen, I think, last year as part of the operating budget, the consolidation of all the road corridors, temporary street occupation, those types of permits consolidated into our development engineering program area from our infrastructure planning. That enabled us to initiate a single permit for site development. Those are the types of permits that certainly are impacted mostly by the community. They're pool permits, site alteration permits, those types of things, which should be fairly straightforward for anyone coming in, a resident coming in to get a permit. So we're looking at putting those into a single permit so they don't have to go to various different places within the town in order to do a one project. The update on the BizPal, this was a comprehensive update, so now any business wanting to locate can more easily find out all of the permits and information they need to undertake in order to get their business established. And of course, parking enhancements. I think Commissioner Lalonde had spoke to this as well as Jane Courtemanche on the changes that we've made in putting permits more accessible, not only to pay your permits, but also on the parking consideration. If you want to park your car on the street overnight, it's a much easier online process to put in place. In the downtown, we have implemented the pay-by license plate machines. We've recently put in some additional machines because we certainly have heard from the downtown community about the issues with those. So those are some service enhancements that we have made. The 2 areas that I focused on is on the economy. Certainly Dorothy St. George and her team in the economic development have made great strides on the economy side with the trade mission to China that has been undertaken, certainly under the mayor's leadership, as well as the sister city agreement that we have with Huayan, China. Then we've taken some actions on the retail action plans. Both Bronte had been done the previous year, but both Kerr and downtown were done. And we have now action plans to assist those BIAs in looking at regeneration of their areas. The Auto Mayor's recommendation, certainly this is an initiative that the Mayor leads. with some of Dorothy's and her staff's assistance in terms of following through with the recommendations and their implementation. And I would highlight the site selection tool. It is, again, a multi-year program. It is a revamp of that program on the website so that you can find out information about where you could find a property to open your business. We're looking at phase 2 of that in 2016, which would expand the amount of information you could get about what's around you when you're looking at investment in properties for your business. On the environmental side, I've highlighted the stormwater management plan. You had recently seen a presentation on that. Phase 1 of that program has been completed, and we're now moving into phase 2 as part of the 2016 program. The last two, actually, I'll flag on there. The climate change strategy you had seen and that had come in. This is very much linked, and I think the biggest initiative we have on climate change is our stormwater study that is currently underway. And the last one I would highlight is the brownfield management project. This is a PSAB requirement to ensure that we have understood what are our limitations for properties that may be contaminated. And that rolls into a larger brownfields program into 2016, which I'll speak to later. So I've listed here some of the awards. You had recently at council seen, I think there was 5 of those awards that had come forward. So I would highlight the GIS Innovation Award that was much earlier in the year. And that would be there were 6 of them actually that were there. So this is certainly a good external recognition of the efforts that town staff put into the projects. Focusing on the key outcomes, the first 3 key outcomes are the amount of time in which it takes us to process permits. The ones that are selected there, the first is relative to the building permit process. So we have a mandatory requirement to process, this example is for residential homes. So a single family home, we have 10 days to process that permit. So you can see the days in which we've been processing them. 2014 is an example where we had 2 bylaws to deal with, both the old bylaw and the new bylaw, and a number of applications coming in. So you'll see that we were up to 13 days, which was slightly over the mandated time frame. We've brought that in order for 2015. And as the 2 bylaws get resolved and we're left with 1 bylaw, we should be able to sustain that or less time as we experienced in 2011 and 2012. In terms of the planning applications, we have made significant changes to our Amanda system. Our Amanda system is a system that we track development applications through. So previously in 2011, 12, and 13, that system was not really up and running for planning, nor was it for development engineering. So we have no tracking numbers in those years. That system is now up and enables us to measure our progress. So you'll see that 75% of the planning applications would be processed within our timeframes for 2014, and that is actually increasing into 2015. Engineering permits, similarly, they're at 70% in terms of both those years, and we are looking and have incorporated additional staff within that group. We had several gapped positions in previous years, and we're looking at filling some of those gap positions in that area in order to be able to get better percentages in terms of our permit issuance timeframes. The last 2 on the slide are relative to our economy, so it looks at our office occupancy rate and our industrial occupancy rate. For the office market, you'll see in 2012 and 2013, we had quite a few office proposals come forward. It is a fairly high vacancy rate for office development, and so the Economic Development Group is looking at an office strategy in order to find out how to fill some of those spaces, and you'll see that for a 2016 project. On the environment side, and as well as the transportation, I've got the first is in terms of the number of days that exceed the Health Canada health reference for fine particulate matter. You'll see that this number is, I think, very much dependent on weather as well. But you'll see the numbers there, and that is something that the town has a limited amount of control over. It is influenced by a variety of factors, but we do have our health protection bylaw, which is our means of ensuring that at least the industries, which is a smaller portion of that, overall are the best technology in order to minimize the impact. So in the transportation, you've seen the increase in our active transportation trails and systems on the on-road increasing over the years. Our traffic, our intersection level of service has maintained a very high level of service consistently from 2011 to 2015. And you can see a decrease in the percentage of pavement that's deficient from 2011 into 2015, and that's very much attributed to Council's commitment to funding that overall program. So in terms of the dollars, the Commission makes up about 11% of the overall gross operating budget. Because many of the program areas are revenue-based, that actually drops to about 3.3% when it gets to the operating budget itself. Looking at the gross budget by by costing areas, the 60% of our expenditures related to our personnel. We have a significant amount in terms of our internal expenses and transfers, so that relates to transfer to reserves, given the enterprise systems that we have in many of the areas, as well as the cost of the other departments, their input into our planning and our building and our development engineering portions, so there's a cost associated with that as well. When we look at the various program areas between the gross and the operating budget, on the gross side, you'll see that building and planning are the biggest portion of that, but their portions of it, particularly in building, shrinks to less than 1% when you consider the operating. Building department runs at about 100% recovery, as well as parking does as well. Development engineering has moved into the similar kind of place with all of the rate rationalization that we've done over the last few years. So it's approaching a full cost recovery as well. So infrastructure planning in the net operating budget takes on the largest portion, and that's to run our infrastructure renewal programs that is heavily part of the capital budget. This bar chart shows the tax levy reliance from each of the program areas. If you look at the bottom 4 program areas, you'll see very minimal change from year to year. So there are inflationary pressures that have really impacted their budgets. Parking, you can see there, it comes in at no impact on the tax levy. It's completely run through the commercial parking as well as the parking fees. Development engineering is reflective of the changes that we've made in our rates over the last year, so that you'll see them coming in at a full cost recovery on these charts. And I'll skip up to the top, which is building services. Building services runs at 100% recovery. Some years they deposit money into reserves, sometimes they rely on the reserve. This particular year, there is a bit of a reliance on the tax levy, and that's mostly a result of the Committee of Adjustment, where the volumes are down in this particular year. Planning services, I'll note, because it has had an increased support in the tax levy, and that is really for 2 reasons, which I'll deal with in the next series of slides. So in terms of the program cost drivers for this commission, the predominant issue is revenues and how secure those revenues are over time. And that is particularly relevant in the planning department for this particular year. So our revenue is based on the rates that we set, the volumes that we have in each year, then gives us our revenue. On the rate side, historically we've had all of our programs are based on a full cost recovery. The exceptions I'd leave to that is heritage. For example, we don't require full cost recovery on those programs. It would be a disincentive for the heritage protection. But the bulk of them between planning, development engineering, and building are full cost recovery. The models that we've had in place in order to generate our rates are 10 years old. And we have experienced over the last several years a growing number of appeals on our planning fees. So in 2014 and 15, we undertake a very comprehensive review of all of our fees. We looked at the assumption was that all of the fees needed to achieve a full cost recovery. We retained a consultant who assisted us in developing a model, and the model is actually a similar model that's used by about 30 other municipalities within the GTA. And what it involved with is understanding what's our time commitment to those applications. in order to generate what should be our rate associated with them. Our fee structure needs to meet the legislative requirement. The legislative requirement is different for each type of application. And I'll give you two examples. In the building department, it is the service, it is the fee or the cost to cover the overall service of a building permit, of a building service. So whether or not, and I'll give you the second example, is in planning, the fees have to be specific to a type of application. So for the building department, it's much easier to be able to calculate that rate because it's the full cost of the service delivery. And then we ourselves are free to look at which rate to apply to the various applications. Whereas in planning, you need to look at specifically that application or that type of application and your anticipated time to deal with that particular application. So it's a much more complex way of being able to generate our rates for that area. So the impact of that review is there were limited changes in the building department. You'll see in the rate package that you had with the agenda on yesterday, there's minimal changes in the building department. Development engineering, there was an increase in the fees predominantly to achieve the full cost recovery. And so you'll see that throughout the rate package that you received. The road corridor had never had that type of a model applied to it to ensure it had full cost recovery, so we were able to put that in place through this exercise. I'm afraid I'm going to start coughing as Gord was, so bear with me for a minute. So on the planning side, you'll see when you look through the rate budget, there has been a decrease in many of the rates, and a fairly significant decrease. And that's mostly in the area of the variable fee. So a planning application is made up of a base fee and then a variable fee dependent on the number of units. And it was the variable fee that, in fact, we had many appeals on. And so we have corrected that variable fee so it accurately represents the time we anticipate to be spent on each type of application. The other issue that we need to deal with in the planning fees is the consolidation. So when we receive an official plan amendment, for example, a zoning and a subdivision application, then with the consolidation of those fees, you'd expect some type of economies of scale in dealing with them all at once, and we had to reflect that in our bylaw. So there has been some changes in our planning fees. So in terms of the volumes, our volumes are very much influenced by the allocation program with the region. The bulk of our permit activity and our planning application activity still comes from the North Oakville development, although the infill is certainly picking up in terms of its overall volumes. When you look at building permits, it's much more predictable to be able to estimate the amount of applications coming in because you've already seen the planning application come through, you've seen it go through the development engineering of its subdivisions, so there's a lot more predictability we have in terms of estimating the amount of volume. And in addition, there's multiple applications that come in through the building department. So if all those applications, if you lose a few applications, it has minimal impact on the overall revenue that comes in. So in essence, building permits are much easier to predict, and you'll see that in terms of our ability to track against budgeted to actuals year over year. Planning applications are at the other end of the scale, with development and engineering somewhere in between. Planning applications are highly susceptible to the economy and the allocation program. So it is the first opportunity the developer has to spend a lot of money on a property, and so we have a very difficult time anticipating when they're going to do that. And also, they have the size of revenue that comes in with an individual application is significant, so there can be a very wide fluctuation in the revenues we get in. For example, one application that you may be expecting in that particular year could be $250,000, and if that doesn't come in, it certainly has an impact on your predictability for your revenue. In terms of the allocation program, it was in 2012, so a lot of that allocation that had been put out has been consumed, and we are now waiting for the next allocation in 2017. So overall, volumes are coming down. They reached their peak in 2014, and that allocation is now being used up, and you see a decrease in the overall volumes. So as a result of the rates we've established and the volumes that we've predicted in each of those areas, this is the impact then on our overall revenues. You see the building department, which is the blue at the top, And you can see in 2014 that peak that we reached with the allocation program that had come out in 2012, and then our predictions moving out. In 2018, although we expect the allocation program to be there, the timing of that we still need to understand in a little bit more detail. So we have not actually reflected what could be coming out of that program. We've left, revenues fairly stable out into 2018. You can see in the red line, which is the planning department, you can see the increase in 2013, which would have come directly after the allocation program, and then the using up of that allocation as it tracks down into 2015. The drop from 2015 to 2016 is a combination of both the volume, but more predominantly the change in rates. So now we have rates that we know are evidence-based and defensible, so that will limit the number of appeals, but it does change our revenue picture going forward. Development engineering, you will see that development engineering starts to increase. It includes the roads corridor, so it's a volume increase, but it is now at a full cost recovery. In the planning department, I would recognize that we do have our cost recovery that's desirable and reflective of the costing model is about at 50%. We are achieving a cost recovery of about 35% in 2016 and about the same in 2017 and 18. So there are two things we're going to be looking at over the next 3 years in order to ensure that we come closer to that projected. And that is to look at the model itself. It's the first year it's now in place, and to track to ensure it's calibrated to the right numbers that we have. But also we need to look at our expense side to see how we can minimize the expenses in going forward. So that's the most significant cost driver for the Commission. So looking forward into 2016, we're in similar areas of focus as we had in 2015. Looking forward, we have the Livable Oakville, a 5-year review that will be coming in. We are also combining the urban design initiatives, as well as the zoning initiatives at the same time. So as we bring in the official plan components, we'll also be following up with both of those. We have the Transportation Master Plan underway. It's an update. So that we can then respond to the DC bylaw that needs to be in place by early of 2018. The traffic calming program, you'll see coming forward in the spring of 2016, and that's the program that we have that goes beyond just the school zone areas. It's how we treat traffic calming throughout the town as a whole. You'll see the cultural heritage landscape come forward as well. Excuse me, with the phase 1 being available in the early part of the year. And then we look at in phase 2, those properties where we do want to proceed with some type of cultural heritage protection. What is the strategies we put in place for that? You'll see that being undertaken over 2016. And again, the Conservation District in Old Oakville would be updated. For service improvements that we're going to be making, this is the site selection tool that's for businesses. So it's adding those other attributes so that if you want to locate a business, you'll have an understanding of what the population is around you and all the demographics that come out of the census information. And we'll begin to see the single permit for the development engineering type of applications online. And it really sets the stage for how we can use that similar kind of online service as we would then move into building and planning applications in later years. On the economy side, in order to deal with that vacancy rate in the office market, the Economic Development Group is going to be looking at an office campaign to see what strategies we need to put in place. There'll be the implementation of the retail action plans, as well as several other initiatives with the Oakville Chinese Business Association, partnering with them. The Innovation Awards were such a success, as I think Dorothy St. George had told you at the council meeting, that we're looking at expanding that out over the region as a whole. And we'll be looking at the brownfields strategy to see how we can move some of those employment lands into more active use. On the environmental side, you'll have the phase 2 of the stormwater management plan in place, and also the program that deals with the new site plan engineering approval process. So that was the interim process that allows us to deal with the individual properties in the older parts of the town to ensure that drainage is sufficiently dealt with as development applications come forward. And then in terms of our energy management, it's looking at a community development plan and our biodiversity strategy, which is a new initiative that will look at how best we can ensure that we've protected, enhanced the biodiversity within the town and all the works that we undertake. So there's 2 additional reports, and they're flagged on the agenda for today. Item 2, Appendix B, is the road pavement performance chart. This was the chart that shows the previous deficiencies in the pavement from other studies. So there's 3 lines that are on that report, and that's in that package that you already have. As well as there's Appendix C, which is the listing of all of the community development, I'll speak to, projects that are in a general allocation of a budget. You would ask for what types of projects would be undertaken in 2016. So if you had any questions on that, myself or any of the team members could help you with that. And that concludes my presentation.
Mayor Burton?
I just have a couple of questions. Can you go back to the discussion of the allocation program? And just for the public's benefit, in 2012, would you be able to specify, I don't want to put you on the spot, and the answers to this can wait if it's a problem, but roughly, how many single detached home equivalents were allocated to Oakville in 2012, and how many are being allocated in the 2018 program?
So I will get you the exact numbers, but I thought it was around 6,900 in 2012, and about 8,000 is allocated for the this current program coming up, 17-18.
And so in terms of the annual impact, we would divide by 4, being the years of the allocation, to get a rough idea, although your chart clearly shows that the flow is not even.
Yeah, it's not even. And you would divide by 4. And also keep in mind that as the North Oakville develops, those SDEs could be, if it's an apartment form, actually double that amount. So you'd have to convert them into actual unit types.
It's our experience, isn't it, that apartments never get built until all the ground form homes are in, so that it can annoy as many people as possible?
It usually is the case. The ground-related does get built first, and then the medium density in the apartments. But you see along Dundas quite a few of the single and townhouse form built already. We are seeing applications come in for the higher density form. For example, at Niagawa and Dundas, we have applications in for some of the apartments there. So we're seeing it already on the lands that have developed.
I know on 6th Line we had an example of the wait till the single-family homes are in before annoying them with the denser forms right behind them. Mm-hmm. So, and I gather that we have no power to compel the builders to do the high density first. It's a traditional question. I have to ask it.
And it's a traditional answer. No, we have no ability to control that.
All right. Now,
Mayor
Councillor.
Burton, sorry, Mayor Burton, before you go on with your questions, were you asking about the number of SDEs in the allocations?
Yeah.
So the 2012 allocation had 4,855 for Oakville, and the 2018 is projecting 4,668. So a very small number, fewer than in the previous allocation for Oakville.
That's the information I was looking for.
There you are.
Those are the droids we were looking for. So thank you for that. The next question is a traditional question, and I ask it in honor of Councillor Alan Elgar, who always asks this question and couldn't be here today because of the Niagara Escarpment Commission. So I'm filling in for him. You had some information to the effect that about the recovery of costs vis-a-vis growth in some of your work there. And I heard you say 35% recovery. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Could you just flesh that out a little more for us and give us, if possible, a dollar figure of what the amount is that we're not able to collect?
Certainly. So the, and it was in reference to the planning applications. We should achieve about a 54% recovery for planning applications because half of the department deals with policy and heritage related elements. So about 54% of that program should be recovered through fees over a 5-year average. So what happens over that 5 years average is sometimes you could potentially, theoretically, I'll say, have an over, your volume of applications are very high and you could over recover. That would go into the tax stabilization, so that in other years you'd have an under recovery, which you could then rely on tax stabilization. That's the theory that we're trying to get to. At this point in time, we have a 35% recovery in planning, which means I think it's about a $1.8 million shortfall in terms of what we should be recovering at the 54%. And so the 35% is in this particular year. So that would be the shortfall. What we're going to do to close that gap is there's two things we need to look at. Are our rates accurate? And we've spent an awful lot of time on that model to make sure it's accurate, but we need some validation of it as we move forward, and we'll be doing that in each year. And that should help us move up closer to that 54%. And then we need to look at the costing side of it to see if there's a way to bring the costing side down so that we can achieve the 54 cost recovery that we should be at.
And given that you also said that we've had appeals filed against our fees, and apparently we're coming up a little short on the revenue side, which suggests that whatever one fee or another might be, we're undercharging in the main, or under-recovering is your evidence, right? Are there any steps we can take to motivate the appellants to not appeal these things? What's the story there?
So I think the step we've taken in putting in this model and doing this work, we can do nothing about the appeals that have already been filed. But going forward, we feel, a very strong evidence-based model to justify the fees that we have in place through this fee update. So appeals that are filed, it's a consistent model that most municipalities use throughout the GTA. So there's some strength in that. And our, I think, position to council would be that we should challenge those appeals if they come in.
And do the appellants pay the fees they're appealing and depend upon, and then if they win, get a recovery? Or do they wait to pay until the appeal is over? How does that work?
So they file an application. They submit the full fees of what we require, and they file those fees in protest. So what we do when it is filed in protest is we hold that amount so that if indeed through the appeal process they're successful, we have the funds to return whatever money is owed to them.
Thank you.
Councillor Knoll?
One quick question. With respect to internal transfers in your budget, one of the questions dawned on me at the time is the costs involved in other departments commenting back. I mean, sometimes the comments on planning applications are simply boilerplate, we have no objections, whatever the case is. Some are quite detailed and probably involve a lot of investigation. I can think of some of the work that Lynn Rogers and her group does in terms of traffic. Are those costs captured and actually reflected in your budget, or do they remain within the individual department's budget?
No, they're reflected as a cost here, and all of those costs have been taken into consideration in the costing model that's been done.
Okay,
so parks and legal, there's many of them throughout the town. We look at it in two ways. For example, Lynn Rogers is transportation. So we actually she now tracks her time to ensure that year over year we can always update the model to ensure we're collecting the right amount. Other services, for example, in corporate services, we would just have a standard amount that we would collect, but all of it's tracked and collected and accounted for in the costing model.
And used in the calculation of the actual fees assessed back to the proponents of the applications?
Yes, it even goes down to the equipment that is used. So any kind of facility equipment in terms of the computer that's used to run that program is factored into the cost of the fees.
Maybe you should include the cost of phone calls to councillors too. Just kidding.
Any other members of committee? Councillor Lishchyna?
Thank you, Commissioner. Going back to your slide about key outcomes, the KPIs regarding the average number of days to issue building permit for a residential home, and this, it looks like 10. When I was canvassing this past summer in the by-election, that was one of the things I heard quite often, that it actually took a lot longer. And one of the things that came out of those conversations was that the building permit would go in looking at the bylaws for whatever they were doing, and then it would come back, and because there were amendments to those bylaws and they were not anywhere near where the original bylaw was, so now they had to go back and look at the amendment, which is also a new bylaw. So my question at the time was, and I believe I even spoke with Councillor Knoll, and we were given the answer that there was going to be some work done to put those together or closer together. Has that happened, or is that in your work plan, or the IT software improved in order to put that together? So hopefully the number of days that it takes for people to actually get a permit is actually 10.
So I think you're referring to is the two zoning bylaws we had in place. So council had approved a new in-zone bylaw a number of years ago. I think it was 2014. But that bylaw was under appeal. So when you filed a permit application, you had to comply with the most restrictive of the two bylaws, our bylaw that was officially in place and approved, as well as the bylaw that was under appeal. And we do that because if the bylaw is approved at a later date, we want to make sure that you're in compliance with the bylaw. So there were two bylaws in effect at one time, and you can see on that KPI in 2014, we have traditionally always met the building permit legislative timeframes. But in 2014, we were 13 days on that particular type of mandated application over the time period, and it was because of the volume, but probably more importantly, the two bylaws that had to be reviewed.
So can you just clarify, if somebody came back that something wasn't properly done in their initial submission, did they start at 0 again for another 10 days? And then if something wasn't correctly done again, they start at 0, so technically it could be 10 times 10? You know, as an extreme example.
I don't believe so, but I would actually suggest that John Tudor may be able to deal with that in a little more detail.
Through the chair, no, councillor, it would not start another 10-day process. It gets a little bit technical. If the review on the zoning is done within the first 2 business days from the time of application, the application is pushed out of the system and is considered to be an incomplete application, and technically would not come on to a 10-day time frame. Customer service certainly would take place, and we would do our very best to review that application. So it's not 10 days, 10 days, 10 days. It's back to the applicant, resubmission, and trying to resolve any issues that there may still be outstanding as quickly as possible.
Councillor Lishchyna, is that satisfactory? Okay. Councillor Amir?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. My question has to do with the looking forward 2016, the economic portion. I'm reading the program description, and while we seem to have covered some ground on the economic development front, I'm not sure I see anything coming forward on the tourism front. And I read with a lot of interest, Windsor has actually gone out and hired a sport tourism coordinator just to promote the use of their facilities, the use of their fields, to actively go and solicit that kind of economic development. I'm wondering if we've had those conversations, if we're looking in that direction, if there's anything that we might be doing sort of proactively to promote what we like to promote here, the largest soccer club in North America, one of the best junior hockey teams, the list goes on, but maybe to maximize that economic aspect of things.
So a number of years ago, we had undertaken, and council had endorsed actually a strategy to tourism, and it was to support tourism with, in essence, about a half a person each year. And the role of that person would be to coordinate with the Oakville Tourism Partnership in order to promote and move forward the tourism events. And so that was the town's commitment at that point in time, and that is the standing commitment to tourism. But I would also add, I know Community Services is coming forward with a special event strategy, although not specifically directed at tourism. It does have tourism elements to it, which elevate the prominence of Oakville in terms of the events that we have. So that would be an additional, and you'll be looking at those reports coming into the early part of the year.
And if I'm not correct, when council did make that decision to supply a half-time FTE, that was with the understanding that once the direct marketing fees were set up and that organization had those fees to facilitate it, then it would be on its own. But as I don't believe those fees are forthcoming, and I believe that's not going to be happening. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, and well, I see Dorothy is here, and you're correct, it hasn't been forthcoming. They had set up the regional tourism groups, which was to flow money into the OTP, and I think we could fairly say that hasn't quite worked the way I had thought it was going to at the time. So the money has not flowed from either of those two options. I think that the regional group is looking again at the hotel destination element, but I think that was up at the RTP level, the regional.
And the regional is not also.
No, that is a much larger area, yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Burton?
I have a little bit of information that helps on that. I think the path we thought was going to unfold was changed by the province when they went to this, and to avoid confusion with the region of Halton, I'll call it this mega region model. And so the assumptions that had been made about the need for a local tourism operation got lifted up to this mega regional operation. And there it sits for now. I have a couple of questions as well. On the building permit side, what kind of, I guess the way to ask the question is, do we have a backlog, and are you able to measure if you have a backlog, can you give us a dimension of it?
I would ask John to maybe come down again. We have, over the years, had a backlog on the inspection side. And a few years ago, during the downturn of 2008, 9, and into 10, we were able to deal with much of that backlog. Whether or not it's accumulated again, I'd refer to John.
Through the chair, Mayor, are you referring to a backlog of inspections of permits that have already been issued and work still to be done out in the field?
I'm referring to, are there any applicants for building permits who are experiencing a backlog and receiving their permit to go build?
Yes, they are.
And do you have dimensional, can you give that a dimension for us?
I don't have a number of the backlog as of today, but I can tell you that we've experienced an extreme high volume of permits. In the last 6 weeks, we've issued close to 600 residential units, which is almost a half year's worth of work in 6 weeks. So yes, there is a backlog, but we are catching up through overtime and other measures. We are catching up, but we are still behind.
Is that something that you might be able to give us a little more definitive measure of, not today, but while we're going through the budget?
Sure, not a problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this component of the budget? Okay, thank you very much. Now, everyone, we've been going at this for about 2 hours. I'm going to suggest that we take a 10-minute recess before we go on, because I think we've probably got, I'm going to say, another 45 minutes of discussion and so forth on the next piece before we deal with the whole thing. So let's take a 10-minute recess. We'll come back and finish off, okay? Okay, recess is over, everybody, and we're back. So we are ready for the final Community Services Commission section, and welcome, Commissioner, and we look forward to your presentation.
Community Services 2016 operating budget. is it doing that? The following programs are represented in this presentation: emergency services, recreation services, culture, library services, parks and open space, infrastructure maintenance, and Oakville Transit. Our accomplishments of 2015 fulfilled these 5 goals and the Council strategic plan: the outstanding service to the public, being innovative in everything that we do, enhancing our natural environment, enhancing our cultural environment, and enhancing the social environment. 2015 has been a very successful year for the community services team, and these are just some of the highlights. There were 5 main themes that we focused on. The first one was responding to our changing community. The key factors that we took into consideration were growth, increased diversity, shifting demographics, and changing trends in leisure and culture experiences. So in response to that, our team created the Recreation and Culture Strategic Plan, which has a much more of a community-based focus, and Council will have an opportunity to review that at February CSC. We also looked at the cultural plan and did a major refresh in consultation with the community, which will also be considered at February CSC. And the culture plan, just as an aside, the province of Ontario has recently come out with a new cultural framework and are looking at putting together a whole new cultural strategy. And based on the framework, our cultural plan is very much aligned with that process going forward. So we're really looking forward to working closely with them. The fire master plan really focused on addressing density and growth as we move forward. The second theme was celebrating in our community. We had a very successful Canadian Open, which was supported by economic development and roads and works. We had a very successful second annual Children's Festival, which celebrated arts and culture for children, and we had over 15,000 people in attendance. We also introduced for the first time in sponsorship with Union Gas a new cultural connections program in the downtown, also highly successful, and over 5,000 people came down to visit over the course of the summer. We've also developed a new special events strategy, which was mentioned earlier, and the whole intent behind that is to actually make things easier for people to run events in the community and to make it much easier to understand how the town processes work. So we're looking at streamlining how we do business. And that will also be coming forward to February CSC. We are also looking at how we enhanced our community. We had our most successful EAB program this year. Just by way of anecdote, one of our targets was to plant over 300 trees, and at the end of this year, we'll have planted over 1,000. Parks and Open Space also partnered with several community groups during 2015 to plant trees and shrubs to increase the town's tree canopy and enhance naturalization efforts. Over 1,000 trees and shrubs were planted with the efforts of community volunteers, which we celebrated at an event quite recently. We also worked in partnership with Oakville Green to establish a pollinator garden at Glen Abbey, and this demonstration garden and interpretive panel provides education regarding the decline in pollinator populations and its impact on the environment. And also Forestry completed the iTree update research on the state of the town's tree canopy, and we will be bringing that forward, the results of that, in 2016. We also worked at becoming more efficient with the development of the LED streetlight conversion strategy. The library really focused on back of office with the ILS system installation, which Councillor Lalonde mentioned earlier. And we also did a big aquatics review in recreation and culture to look at better ways of delivering the service. We did a major focus on improving service through innovation. The first one is the new incident management system that was introduced by emergency planning. This is a new system that came out of the recommendations from Elliott Lake, And it's a system that the province is really promoting as the new way to do business with respect to emergency planning and response. The difference in how the system works is the way that we have traditionally worked in the past, our EOCs have been organized along departmental lines. Going forward with this new system, we will be organized functionally and will make us a lot more nimble and efficient in terms of how we approach emergency planning. We also did a review of our transit service and tabled a 5-year plan, which was approved unanimously by Council. We introduced a new home-to-hub service in July of this year, and by the end of this year, we'll have done a full implementation of the ITS technology, which was referenced earlier as well. We also did an internal forestry review. Forestry has undergone incredible, unprecedented growth in their workload. Primarily due to the invasion of EAB, which impacted 55,000 trees, and more recently the ice storm, which impacted over 11,000 trees. So the focus of that review was to look at ways to leverage technology, streamline our administrative processes, and expand community partnerships for greater efficiency. We also launched Active Oakville, which is our online program finder, and we are finalizing implementation of a new FDM system, which is Fire Department Management System, for better fire response and performance. We won 4 awards this year. The first one was in transit. The Canadian Urban Transit Association awarded Debbie Delvado the International Leadership Award for Heroism. If you remember, one of our bus drivers collapsed at our transit facility and she saved his life. The second one is Recreation and Culture. Ontario Contact is a provincial association that works closely with artists, promoters, and government to promote cultural interests across the province. And Ronnie Brown won Presenter of the Year this year. And also in Recreation and Culture, Parks and Recreation Ontario awarded Oakville the Youth Friendly Community Gold designation. And one that is rather unique is in Parks and Open Space, our forestry group won we were the first Canadian municipality to be accredited by the Society of Municipal Arborists outside of the United States. This is the highest honor for municipal urban forestry programs, and the programs are judged on their planning, routine operations, and management. In terms of KPIs, the first one is a fire one. It's the percentage of response crew travel time, where we need to be at a site in 240 seconds or less. As you can see from 2011, we have improved our response time in 2015 to 74.9. It is slightly down from 2013, and most of this can be attributed to traffic congestion. It is becoming more and more difficult to get to scenes quickly. The second one is the percentage of ash canopy conserved. Since 2012, we have had a steady decline in our ability to preserve our ash tree canopy. However, that can be attributed to 2 main issues, particularly after the ice storm, the stress caused by inclement weather, and also where we were not able to get to the trees in time. You can't always determine whether or not they're going to respond when you're trying to do the injections. We added 6 kilometers of trail in 2013. And then the library collection mix, this is a particularly interesting one. If you will notice, the smaller number in each of the years is the percentage of digital, and the larger number is the percentage of print. You will see that from 2011, the library has been steadily increasing their digital collection. However, there has been a lot of comment from members of the public, and certainly the board scrutinized this as well. They expressed concerns that they were not moving quickly enough in terms of introducing more digital products. The issue here is the fact that digital products are at a much higher price point than traditional print, and is in some cases prohibitive in terms of being able to acquire these products for the library collection. There is a lobby movement at the national level to work with publishers to try and negotiate a better funding arrangement for libraries. The percentage of citizen satisfaction with the library is consistent at 90%, and our minimum maintenance standard deficiencies, which are identified by lane kilometer, have remained steady over the last few years. You'll notice that there was a deep dip after 2011, and that's because the Municipal Performance Measurement Program, which was a provincial program, reviewed their criteria and narrowed the criteria in 2011, and that's why you see the dip going forward. The percentage of surveyed citizens satisfied with our roads and sidewalks has increased to 85%. A special success story is our program registrations. If you notice, in 2011, we sat at 36,400. In 2015, we sit at 46,400. And a lot of the great work there has been done with our camp team. Percentage of citizens satisfied with recreation programs, we're sitting at 87%, and that's year to date. One of the things to note, this is a citizen survey that we do in addition to the broader town survey. We survey our participants immediately following completion of a program or course to get immediate feedback on how they feel that we're doing. One of the areas that has been really important to us is the comments section of these surveys, because they have been able to provide us with some really excellent feedback that we've then been able to incorporate in program design. Our transit ridership is holding steady at 2.9 million. Our gross operating budget is 167.5 million. Community services represents 56.3%. Our net operating budget is 116 million, and we represent 67.8%. In our gross budget by cost, as you can see, the three largest cost drivers are personnel, salaries and benefits at 58.5%, internal expenses and transfers to building, equipment, and fleet reserves at 15.1%, and purchasing services at 13.2%. Our gross operating budget breakdown by department, as you can see, emergency services is sitting at the highest with 20.8 million, infrastructure maintenance at 19.5 million, and transit at 18.6 million. Our net operating budget breakdown, emergency services sits at 29.5 million, transit at 18.3 million, and infrastructure maintenance at 18 million. When you look at our impact on the tax levy, what you will see is that emergency services is sitting at 34.4 million. Oakville Transit is sitting at 21.3, and infrastructure maintenance is 20.9, with the greatest impact in 2016. To go into a little more detail on our three largest budgets, emergency services, the personnel costs are the main driver, which is accounting for $668,000 of the $1 million increase. Emergency services budget is also driven by transfers to the equipment reserve and transfer to the building maintenance reserve for fire station number 9. For infrastructure maintenance, there are three main pressure points in that budget: contractual wage increases and new staff, growth impacts and service expansion, and contract increases on winter control, leaf pickup, catch basin maintenance, and increase to the the one-call locate system. In addition, there were increased transfers to equipment reserves. For transit, the main pressures are the implementation of year 1 of the transit 5-year plan, the capital budget impacts, and contractual wage increases. The council strategic goals for 2016 are the same as 2015. And we have 4 main themes. The first one is the digital citizen. As you will have heard from both Jane Courtemanche and Commissioner Lalonde, there is a real emergence of a need for a greater focus on digital services. So in response to this, the Community Services Commission, in partnership with Community Development and Corporate Services, will be developing a corporate digital strategy. This is a really important step forward. It will be knitting together our strategies around how citizens want to access services, how they want to engage with the town, and how they want to conduct business. And this is particularly important because very few organizations in the public sector have taken a strategic approach of this nature. They usually do one aspect, so they will have an open data or an open government strategy or an e-service strategy, but they will not have one comprehensive approach. The ones that are most notable are the City of New York, City of Vancouver, and the Province of Ontario. So we are hoping to become leaders in this area. In concert with this, the library is also developing their strategic plan, and they are looking at digital transformation of the library system over the next 5 years. One of the early wins will be the first digital library hub, which will be based at Iroquois Ridge. We will also be, transit riders will also be seeing real-time transit information through the implementation of ITS. And we are starting work on the class system replacement, which will ensure that we have greater functionality and ease of access for parks and recreation registrations. In responding to our changing community, which is an ongoing theme, we will be implementing the Recreation and Culture Strategic Plan. We will be looking at presenting an older adult strategy in response to shifting demographics, which are happening at a rather rapid rate. And in January, we'll be opening the youth center in the Glen Abbey area. We will be implementing the cultural plan, the fire master plan, and we will be working on the Harbours Master Plan. One thing I wanted to highlight in terms of the Harbours Master Plan, we were originally going to do the public engagement this year. However, we slowed it down when we found out that the region was going to be doing a master plan refresh of the Outer Bronte Harbor. And so what we are going to do is we are going to run those two consultations together so that it's one comprehensive approach for everyone. And in terms of improving our services, we are, starting in September, transit riders will see increased frequency of service, which is something they've been asking for a long time. There will be the introduction of self-serve checkout options at the library, and also the library will be undertaking a massive refresh of their website. There will be mobile data terminals on response vehicles. So what this means is on January 1st, all of our response vehicles will have mobile data terminals. Emergency crews will be able to receive response information, access onboard mapping, routing information, key property information, including hazards, fire life safety systems for the specific location that they are addressing. So that's one of our more exciting initiatives. We will be implementing the special events strategy. We will be completing phase 1 of LED streetlight implementation, and we will be implementing the capital asset management system for the roads operations, and that will include work orders. We will also be enhancing the community through the introduction of the private tree bylaw, which will be coming forward in February. We will continue our work on the EAB program, and we will be reporting out on the state of Oakville's tree canopy. There are 2 other reports here for your consideration under additional information requested by the Budget Committee. You had asked for a list of community services projects with specific locations and local neighborhoods. That information is contained in Appendix C. Council has also requested a list of 2016 capital projects and the balance of the 9-year capital forecast for community services. That's in Appendix D. And the second report is about the Canada 150 Fund application, and this is for local sesquicentennial events. We are requesting a one-time funding request of $75,000. This is a mandatory eligibility requirement. The overall request is actually for $500,000 from the federal government to support local celebrations. Questions?
Well, there we go. One quick question. The new class system or the implementation of the class system, does that include permitting to users?
Yes, it does.
So that whole system is out the door, or is it?
Yes, it is. It's no longer going to be supported. So we are actually working with a consortium of other municipalities to look at different systems going forward. And one of the big issues is to have greater functionality and for the design to be more intuitive, because the class system is not as intuitive as one would hope.
That's an understatement. Will there be any self-serve options for regular users, or will it still be the same style system that you speak to, or do the paper permitting system?
So one of the things that we would be looking at is greater functionality and the opportunity for self-serve. When you look at how services are being designed in the public sector, there is a much greater emphasis on self-serve, and it's really becoming a mandatory requirement.
Exciting, thank you.
Councillor Duddeck, did I see your hand? No. Mayor Burton then?
A working mic. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. They're all range all over the map. The first is, I know that some years ago we created a partnership with the City of Burlington on fire dispatch, and every few years I like to ask if we're satisfied with how that's operating. I know they're good neighbors. I just want to know if they're good partners.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have had an excellent relationship with Burlington with respect to the operation of the dispatch and providing dispatch to our firefighters. I guess the best way to say is Oakville enjoys an extremely well-managed and forward-thinking IS&S department that you've heard presentations about today. I think Burlington would wish that they had the same type of support. We have had unending challenges with the software side of the dispatching system in Burlington, to the extent that we have now, as the commissioner has explained to you, have installed our own complete records management system on the Oakville side. And while Oakville and Burlington went together to buy the tablets and mobile technologies for the vehicles, we will be implementing ours and they will not be implementing theirs, because so far they haven't been able to support the system on their side. So there are some challenges in our desire to optimize every available piece of technology to get the most effective response to our firefighters, and that is a very IT intensive process at the moment, similar to the challenges I know Barry has spoken to you about bringing the integrated transit system forward. But as far as dispatching our vehicles, receiving the calls, delivering the service on time, they're doing a fine job of that. We're just having to tweak a number of the behind the scenes processes to improve our ability to deliver service here.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting answer. And before you go away, there was a chart shown us a few minutes ago on fire response times. And I was thinking the public would be assisted to understand it better if we knew if there's a provincial benchmark for that and where we sit with relation to it.
There is a provincial benchmark which is related to getting 10 people on scene in 10 minutes, known as 10 and 10. However, the real factor to provide life-saving service to our citizens is how fast we can get the first truck to the scene and take initial incipient action at the fire scene. And we are among the leaders in trying to do that in 4 minutes. And our fire master plan suggests that under optimal circumstances, we should be able to get a vehicle based on the density of our fire halls and travel times to a home in Oakville 90% of the time, or 80% of the time in 4 minutes. I'm sorry. We're hitting 74.6 at the moment and striving to do better.
So does that mean that we might benefit from examining the placement of our fire halls to increase our ability to meet that benchmark? Because I know, if I can call it 4 and 4, we went to 4-person trucks some years ago after I became mayor in aid of reaching that particular target, and so it would be nice to reach it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, going to 4 on a truck, which we did, was to maximize the ability of that crew to take the most effective action when they arrived on the scene. We didn't actually add any vehicles into the system. We did add a vehicle into the system when we opened Station 9, and through the addition of that vehicle, we have leveled the service across our municipality to the extent that the people in the northern new developed areas are now receiving that first fire truck in roughly the same time as our other residents have. One of the things that's affecting us right now is we are awaiting Station 8. We are experiencing additional development regularly in the western borders of our community, and we don't have a station at the moment ideally located there. Council has provided us funding to completely redo the master fire plan. That report will be coming before you mid-2016, which will give us options and new projections related to the addition of Station 8. There is always optimization if you were to say take all the existing fire halls and cover them up so you couldn't see them and take a fresh look at Oakville and say if we could find property and if there was no other restriction, could we take our 9 fire halls, which we'll have when we open Station 8, and put them anywhere we wanted. We could probably make some improvement in that service delivery, but the study shows us most of our stations, with the possible exception of one, are pretty well located right now.
All right, so we're 6% away from the target, and your master plan is going to show us a path forward.
The master plan will show you a path forward, and I'm confident that our increased ability to mine our own data, now that we have it in-house, may show that some of those numbers aren't as accurate as they could be, because currently those numbers are being supplied through the database in Burlington that our staff actually don't have access to pull the data from.
Well, thank you very much for that clarification. Thank you, Chief, for your information. Mr. Green, is there a business opportunity for our IS&S department to assist the city of Burlington? That's a rhetorical question. You don't need to answer it. My next question is with regard to the road standard statistics, the benchmarks, Commissioner, that you showed us, and you explained the dip to 0.31, and you attributed it to a tightening up by the province. But you didn't explain how you managed to bounce back right up to or appears to be a more satisfactory level. Did we tighten our performance to go with their tightening of definition?
Through you, Mr. Chair, our roads, it's a combination of the roads and works teams efforts and engineering construction. It's a combination of the hot mix program, and also we have a very strong preventative maintenance program.
And then turning to transit, I assume the 2015 ridership figure that said 3.9 million, or rather I hope it is, a year-to-date number. Is it a year-end number or a year-to-date number?
No, it's a year-to-date number.
Would you have a forecast for what the year-end number might reach?
Do we know?
Through Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, you're asking for 2015 projected year-end? 2015 projected year-end would be about 2.9 million.
Did you want to put that slide back up? And maybe you want to look at this slide before you say 2.9 million, or I do anyway. So year-to-date, you're showing 2.96. And if you look at the trend we had there, I was kind of expecting to hear you say a number over 3 given that trend. So let me ask that again. What's your forecast for the year-end number?
Well, I believe that year-to-date that's showing there is incorrect because our forecasted number for ridership is 2.9.
So that leads to the question, what happened? Because that's a reduction from 2014.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. Ridership has gone down this year. It held steady at about a 1 to 1.25% increase the previous year. It increased significantly in the 3 years following the 2009 service improvements. But for the last 5 years, there's been a marginal decrease in overall service levels, and we've had a fare increase in every year of those 5 years, and that's impacted ridership.
All right.
I can also add, too, that we're one of I think, 4 systems in the GTA that are experiencing a downturn in ridership this year.
So my next question about transit is, in terms of these years, would we be able to see a cost per ride for each year? In terms of, the tax contribution to these rides?
Yes, we can produce that.
Thank you. And finally, on the question of the harbor review being done by the region, are we, well, before I ask if we've asked them, let me ask if we're interested in having the region transfer the outer harbor to our harbor operation, on the theory that you might get some kind of economies of scale if you had them all.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the Bronte Outer Harbor is actually contracted out to a private company. So if we were going to take a look at that, we would have to look at that within the context of the broader operational impact.
And is it also a case that there's some kind of federal relationship with the region as regards the harbor? Mm-hmm. And I understood from the region that there was some interest at the region to transfer the contractual relationship with the feds to the town. And I know former Mayor Barrett, this is very near and dear to his heart, so I asked this question in his honor. Commissioner or Mr. Town Manager, which?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I suspect there perhaps has been some interest expressed, but it seems to be down in the ranks of regional staff. I think at the senior level, as I understand it, they are not looking to making that transfer. The lease is with them, and they continue to support the park side and will be in the future working in partnership with the town. But I don't believe there is a move with respect to the restaurant Lighthouse, I believe it's called, facility, as well as the outer harbor. In fact, I believe they anticipate continuing on.
If for the sake of discussion, there were an interest at all the appropriate levels of the region, would we have a reciprocal interest in taking it on?
It certainly would be something we'd want to explore.
Thank you very much. That's what I needed to know.
To you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr.
Chair. Could I perhaps add a little bit on the transit file? And you'll recall, through you, Mr. Chairman, that Mr. Cole did bring forward, as Commissioner Bell indicated, the 5-year transit review. Part of what we are trying to do, and we've recognized, and as Barry has said, a number of other GTA municipalities have experienced this flattening out. As things happen with GO, we would anticipate that would increase with time, as well as, if the cost of fuel started going higher again, and that's, I think, a large part. A year and a half ago, when you bought a liter of gas, you were paying almost $1.40. You're now down at the Husky to 96 cents, which also has an influence there. But one of the things we're trying to achieve, even though the ridership may be flattening out, one of the things that we're looking at doing is, reducing a number of the transit routes that have very, very poor ridership. And part of what we're looking at doing then is taking the vehicle time and the vehicle hours that go with that, invest that into a higher frequency so that we can actually boost. So our goal, and to your question on the tax support, our goal is actually to reduce the tax support. And even if the ridership remains level, we still are looking to adjust the route so that we can boost that ridership. Currently, I believe we're at about 28, where are you, Barry? Oh, there you go, 28% RC ratio. And our goal over the, within the
35.
5-year program, I believe, is to get to 35.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Green. I appreciate that, and I hope the public is heartened by the discovery that we do have a plan that council has already adopted. But I do believe that it's important for transit riders to know how much tax money is being lavished on the ride they enjoy.
Absolutely agree.
So I thank you for that. As we look at the electrification of the GO line and a possible expectation that we would increase yet again our ability to meet the train, we're looking at, if this could eat us alive, this transit. So I'm glad you're on it. Thank you.
We continue to more than tweak it.
Members of the committee, any other questions? No? Okay, I've got one question I wanted to ask our staff. It's about the EAB management program that we've got. We've got a very aggressive program. It's a major item in our capital plan over the next 10 years, and it shows up in our annual operating side of things as it flows through. We've got, over 10 years, about, I think it's $28 million, if I've got the number correctly in my head. Other municipalities are also all dealing with EAB. I know Mississauga's got, I think it's a $57 million program or plan approximately in their horizon. And I believe Burlington's in the order of 11 million, but I don't know over what time horizon. And I understand that different people are dealing with it in different time frames. Could we get, either as part of this process or as part of our urban forestry work that's coming forward, can we get a review of what the other municipalities are doing in the GTA? And every municipality is different by way of how urban they are, how much physical geographic space they have to deal with, whether they've got parklands that they have to deal with, and that sort of thing. So everyone's different. Everyone's got a different mix of ash tree versus something else. And I think it would be helpful for us to understand how we line up with the others, because it is such a giant capital program. I think we need to know a little bit more about that. Mayor Burton.
Given all the differences among the cities and towns, would we, I'm not massively unhappy about the idea of asking staff to expend that work, but given the differences among all the cities, how useful would that be? I have to wonder. How about, would it be also useful to also ask what would be the impact, and what would be, if we did it, and what would be our ability to spread it out over a few more years rather than the 10?
I suppose that's where it really gets to, is in what time frame do you want to deal with it? I know at Credit Valley we're discussing that very question, where they're coming to the region of Halton for additional funding, and they're looking at either a 5-year, 7-year, or 10-year plan. And we may, in that case, land on a 7-year plan where we spread it out just a little bit, but not so much that it becomes inefficient to deal with the issue. And I know that Mississauga, during their review and their consideration of the $57 million plan, had done a review of what some of the other GTA communities and broader Ontario communities were undertaking with respect to street tree management, as well as the broader issue of the urban forest spaces, the woodland spaces, I'll say.
So would
it's a few years old. I think it's about 4 or 5 years old now.
And it wouldn't serve your purposes?
It's a starting point, but I think it'd be interesting to know what people have decided to do about it, because I think at that point most of the communities were still considering how big a problem they had.
Let me turn the question around. What would you, if you got the information, what would you like to do with it?
Well, at the end of the day, the question is, are we doing the right thing about EAB with respect to how fast we're cutting them down and replacing them? Are we targeting the right trees? So at the end of the day, when it comes to the budget, it is a question of, are we spending the right amount in the right years? So it's a bigger question, I think, than
So which way would you like to go on that question?
Well, I think
Shorter, where we are, or longer?
let's get some information. How about that?
What information would you need in order to decide a direction?
I think the information that we'd be looking for is, again, how big of a problem do we have, and are we dealing with it in the right way, considering what others have found?
Well,
so I'm looking for some more information about EAB management.
I'm just trying to understand what you're asking for and how it'll help us make that decision. I'm pretty sure we understand how big a problem we have. We spent a lot of money and time on that, right?
Yeah.
So the only variable here that I mean, unless you can name another one, isn't the only variable the amount of time you spread it over?
Yes, and I think there's also a ongoing review required of our street tree treatment program to make sure that it is in fact being effective. We see, I think, a fair number of trees that don't make it through that program for various reasons. So I think because that treatment program is relatively new, I think it requires us to check on it.
So to assist staff, what I'm trying to do with my questions is to narrow down to what your real objective is so that they can bring back what you're looking for. Because when we're just asking them to tell us what everybody's doing, we haven't moved very far down the path that I now detect, I think, of looking at, are we doing the right thing, and are we doing it over the right amount of time? Do I understand you better now?
Yes, I hear from our staff in their presentation that in 2016 they're going to be going through an EAB program review, and that we're going to be receiving information regarding our forestry health. Am I correct on that? I think
For the whole tree canopy.
For the whole tree canopy, including the effect of EAB, I believe. I think that's an appropriate point to consider all of these questions, and I want to make sure that we're going to be in a good space to be able to do that when we come to it.
Then I guess I need to ask, when do you want this information?
I'm hoping to get all of that as part of our review process when we go through 2016.
Sorry,
So
when?
When we get the review documents in 2016, I'm hoping that we'll have full information to consider whether we're in the right spot for it.
So,
Mr. Green?
So not for this budget, but for later when this other thing is done?
Correct.
Thank you. That helps me.
Thank you
a
very
lot.
much, Mr. Chairman. I was hoping that, in fact, my comments in part were going to be, this is something we'd bring forward during part of our normal work process. And just consulting with Mr. Mark for a moment, I know there's, much like engineers in the municipal business, forestry people and parks people do spend an awful lot of time looking at our various programs. And I think there's probably information that we could pull together, because part of that communication is looking at that best practice. Would hope that what we will find is that we're doing the right thing for Oakville over the right period. But, you know, I think there is information we can pull together that would demonstrate that.
Great, I appreciate that. And again, my point here is to try and make sure that we're spending the right amount on the right things as we go forward. It's a big program, and it's not a one-year thing, it's a 10-plus year thing. And so I think we need to do some ongoing due diligence to make sure that we've got it right as we go through it. That's all.
And that's right. And what we will find is there are also different philosophies out there which we can articulate. For example, when EAB, my recollection is when it first started out down in the Windsor area, they just decided that, well, forget it, we'll just cut everything down. And I don't think that's, you know, so everybody has managed this different, and we can look at that and bring forward that report. I think we have perhaps different objectives that some of our adjacent municipalities may well have similarly.
Okay, any other questions that we want to bring forward now? Okay, before we go to, thank you very much for the presentation. I think you've dealt with all the questions for yourself. Members of committee, there are 5 reports here. There's also item C1. Before I go to taking motions for those, are there any members of the public here for any items? Just want to double check. I don't see any. Thank you. Members of committee, we have item number 1, which is the 2016 operating budget commissioner presentations. I'm looking here for a motion to receive. Councillor Knoll has moved such. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item number 2 is the additional information requested by budget committee in relation to the capital budget. Members of committee, would you like to make a motion regarding that? Councillor Duddeck, are you moving as recommended? Very good. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item number 3 is the video surveillance business improvement areas report. Councillor Duddeck is moving to receive. All those in favor? That's carried. Item number 4 is the update on construction of community center at the former hospital site. Can I have a motion to deal with that one, please? Councillor Knoll, are you moving receipt? Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Item number 5 is the Canada 150 fund application request. Could I have a mover of that report? Councillor Duddeck has moved it. All those in favor? That's carried. We have item C1 regarding labor relations. Members of committee, is there any request to go in camera to hear any additional information? No? Members of staff, is there any additional information you wish to provide us? Okay. Could I have a mover to deal with that report? That's moved by Councillor Duddeck. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everybody. That deals with the information that's provided to us. We are just about ready to adjourn. I'll just say that if you have additional questions or information that you're seeking, please let us know as soon as you can so that we can make sure that you get it in a timely fashion. Thank you, everybody.